Emily Wheeler's life appeared flawless to those who looked from the outside. She had the perfect husband, Mark, a successful career as a nurse, and a cozy home in the small, quiet town of Westridge. The couple had recently discovered that they were expecting a child, a joyous occasion that seemed to complete their happy little family. Mark, a well-respected mining engineer, adored Emily and the idea of becoming a father. He often spoke of his dreams of raising their child in a safe and loving home, and Emily, with her radiant smile and warm heart, seemed to share those hopes. However, behind closed doors, Emily was hiding a secret that threatened to unravel everything. For months, she had been involved in a passionate affair with Robert, a quiet, enigmatic man she had met in a local art class. Their connection had been instant, a spark that seemed to ignite something Emily didn't even know was missing from her life. Robert was different from Mark, where Mark was stable, dependable, and predictable. Robert was mysterious, impulsive, and full of surprises. Emily found herself captivated by his intense attention and the escape he offered from her routine life. The affair had started innocently enough, with secret meetings in secluded spots, but it quickly grew deeper, more complicated, and more dangerous. Emily felt torn between two worlds. She loved Mark, but the bond she had with Robert felt electrifying in a way she had never experienced before. Her pregnancy made everything more difficult to hide. As her body changed, so did her emotions, and the guilt of keeping such a big secret began to eat away at her. Mark had no idea about the affair, and though he was busy with work, he had grown more attentive to her needs. Yet Emily found herself pulling away from him, lost in her own turmoil. The affair wasn't something Emily had planned. At first it had seemed harmless, just an escape from the pressures of daily life. But Robert's persistent presence in her life began to feel suffocating. He wanted more from her. He wanted her to leave Mark and start a new life with him. At first Emily resisted, knowing that leaving Mark was unthinkable, especially with the baby on the way. But Robert's charm, combined with his dark intensity, made it harder and harder for her to resist his pleas. Every secret meeting, every stolen kiss, felt like a betrayal. Emily had always prided herself on being loyal, on doing the right thing, but Robert had a way of making her feel like she deserved more, like she could have a life full of excitement and passion instead of the predictable, safe life she had built with Mark. Emily wasn't sure what to do anymore. She loved her husband, but the guilt of the affair weighed heavily on her heart, and as the months went by, the choices grew more complicated. She couldn't keep living this double life, but leaving Mark was something she could never imagine doing until she realized that she might not have a choice. The weight of the situation grew heavier every day, and Emily couldn't help but feel that the truth was coming closer to the surface. She had to make a decision, but she didn't know if she was strong enough to face the consequences. Deep down, Emily feared that her secret would not stay hidden forever, and when it was exposed, it would destroy everything. She just didn't know how right she was. Robert was a man of few words, but his presence was undeniable. He had a quiet intensity that seemed to pull people in, especially Emily. When they first met in the local art class, she hadn't expected much more than a passing acquaintance. She was there to escape the mundanity of her daily life, and the idea of picking up a paintbrush had seemed like a perfect distraction. Robert, with his mysterious demeanor, was unlike anyone she had ever encountered. His piercing blue eyes, usually hidden behind dark hair, gave him an almost brooding quality, and he had an air of quiet confidence that made him stand out in a room full of strangers. The connection between them was immediate, though neither of them had anticipated how quickly it would grow into something deeper. Robert's charm wasn't the loud, attention-grabbing type. It was subtle, calculated. He listened to Emily in a way that Mark, in his busy work life, hadn't done in years. Robert made her feel like the center of his world, and that sense of importance was something Emily hadn't realized she craved. As their meetings became more frequent, their conversations drifted from casual to personal, and Emily found herself telling Robert things she had never shared with anyone. It was as if he knew exactly what to say to make her feel understood, seen and wanted. As the affair progressed, So did Robert's hold on Emily. He didn't demand much at first, but as their relationship deepened, he began to make more requests. Robert's obsession with Emily grew, though it wasn't immediately obvious to her. He would show up unannounced at her workplace, send her text messages at odd hours, and question her every time they were apart. Emily, for her part, tried to downplay his increasing presence in her life, pushing the thoughts of his possessiveness aside, convincing herself that it was just part of the passionate love they shared. But soon, Robert's darker side began to emerge. He would become angry when she couldn't make time for him, accusing her of choosing her husband over him. Emily would apologize, trying to soothe his bruised ego, and they would go on as if nothing had happened. Yet, each apology felt more hollow, more strained. The fear of his temper began to creep into her thoughts, though she couldn't bring herself to acknowledge it fully. Robert's need to control her seemed to grow with each passing day. He began to talk more seriously about their future together, demanding that she leave Mark and start fresh with him. Emily resisted, but Robert's insistence made her uneasy. He threatened to expose their affair to Mark, hoping to force her hand. He didn't seem to care about the consequences. He was only concerned with what he wanted, Emily and no one else. Emily's mind raced with confusion and guilt. She wasn't sure what to believe anymore. Could she really leave Mark? Was Robert the man she wanted to build a life with? The love she felt for Mark, the man she had been with for years, seemed to pale in comparison to the intoxicating passion Robert offered. But there was a darker side to Robert she hadn't fully understood until it was too late. Robert's desire to possess Emily, to make her his own, began to cloud his judgment. Emily's pregnancy only complicated things further. Robert was uncomfortable with the idea of Emily having a child with another man. He became more volatile, more demanding, and Emily realized that his threats weren't just words, they were real. His obsession with her was no longer about love. It had become about control, and in his mind, if he couldn't have her the way he wanted, no one would. Emily's fear grew with every encounter, yet she found herself trapped in his web. She couldn't see a way out. Robert had manipulated her emotions so skillfully that she couldn't distinguish what was real from what he had made her believe. Despite her growing apprehension, Emily still found herself torn. She had to choose between the man she had been married to for years, the father of her child, and the man who had promised her a different life, one filled with the kind of excitement she had only dreamed of. The more she tried to distance herself from Robert, the more dangerous their relationship became, and Emily began to fear that the situation might spiral out of her control. The day Emily disappeared seemed like any other at first, the sun casting a soft golden light over the town of Westridge. Mark had kissed her goodbye that morning, as he always did, heading out to work with a promise to come home early. He didn't know that this would be the last time he'd see her alive. Emily had made the decision to meet Robert that day, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. She had spent the past few days trying to ignore the growing tension between them, but Robert's relentless pressure to leave Mark had finally broken her down. She couldn't avoid him any longer. Their relationship had become toxic, and she feared the consequences of rejecting him. Emily had always been the one to avoid confrontation, always trying to please everyone. But now, trapped in this dangerous triangle, she didn't know how to escape. She told Mark she was meeting some friends for lunch, as she had done countless times before. Mark had no reason to doubt her, but instead of heading to a cafe or a local park, Emily drove in the opposite direction, toward a secluded part of the countryside. Her destination was an old, abandoned mineshaft on the outskirts of town, a place that had once been a hub of activity but now stood forgotten, overgrown with weeds and shadows. It was a spot Robert had suggested, a place where they could meet in private without anyone noticing. She had been there before, under the guise of a casual walk, but today things were different. The air between them had changed, and Emily felt an unease that she couldn't shake. When she arrived, Robert was already there, standing near the entrance to the mineshaft. He didn't smile when he saw her, his face instead a mask of anger and frustration. His demeanor was colder than it had ever been, and Emily could sense that something was off. As she approached, he didn't greet her with the warmth she had grown accustomed to. Instead, he grabbed her arm tightly, pulling her toward the entrance of the mine shaft. "Why did you wait so long?" Robert's voice was low, tense, the words coated with accusation. "I told you what would happen if you didn't make a decision. You can't keep stringing me along, Emily. I won't let you." Emily felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had been trying to delay the inevitable, but now it was clear that there was no more time for hesitation. Robert was no longer the charming, mysterious lover she had once known. His jealousy had turned into something darker, something dangerous. He was demanding that she choose him, and he was no longer willing to accept anything less. "I'm not ready," Emily whispered, pulling away from his grip. "I can't leave Mark. I can't leave everything behind." Robert's face twisted in fury. The man she thought she knew had disappeared, replaced by someone unrecognizable. He stepped closer, his eyes flashing with an intensity that made her blood run cold. "You don't have a choice anymore," he spat. "I can't let you go back to him. You belong to me, Emily. You should have known that." The situation had escalated far beyond anything Emily had imagined. The panic began to rise in her chest, as Robert's grip tightened again, this time pulling her toward the dark, cavernous opening of the mine shaft. Her heart raced, and a feeling of dread washed over her. She tried to pull away, to scream, but the words caught in her throat. In the chaos that followed, everything happened so quickly that Emily barely had time to comprehend it. Robert's anger exploded, and in a flash, the last thread of control he had over his emotions snapped. Emily tried to fight him, to scream, but it was no use. The dark tunnel of the mine shaft swallowed her cries, and she felt the cold earth beneath her feet as she was dragged further inside. Fear surged through her as Robert's grip turned violent, and she realized with horror that she might not make it out alive. The struggle continued, each moment filled with raw, desperate fear. Emily's mind raced with thoughts of Mark, of the life she had once known. But it all seemed so distant now. There was no escape, no way to undo the mistakes she had made. Robert's rage consumed him, and in those final moments Emily understood that nothing would stop him from claiming her, whether she wanted it or not. Her life, her future, all of it was slipping away in the darkness of the mine shaft, and with each breath, the weight of her decisions became too much to bear. The silence that followed was deafening. The mine shaft, once a place of forgotten history, had become the setting for the most tragic moment of Emily's life. The moment Emily's disappearance was reported, the small town of Westridge was shaken to its core. The quiet, tight-knit community had never experienced such a chilling event. Mark, frantic and devastated, called the police, insisting that something was terribly wrong. Emily had never been one to stay out without a word, especially with her pregnancy nearing its final stages. Detective Miller and Detective Harlow were assigned to the case, their first task being to gather any possible clues and try to trace Emily's last known whereabouts. The investigation began with questions. Mark, in a state of shock, told the detectives that Emily had gone out to meet friends, but he couldn't reach her after that. The information seemed innocent at first, but there was an underlying tension that began to emerge. Mark, though clearly distraught, appeared unusually composed for someone whose wife was missing. Detective Miller, a seasoned investigator, noticed small inconsistencies in Mark's recounting of events. The timeline didn't add up. Mark had mentioned Emily's lunch plans, but there was no confirmation from any of her friends or family that she had indeed met anyone that day. Detective Harlow, more focused on the technical aspects of the case, began retracing Emily's movements. They discovered that she had driven her car to a secluded part of the town, far from her usual places of interest. A witness had reported seeing her vehicle near an old, abandoned mine shaft. It seemed strange at first. Why would Emily, who was so familiar with the area, venture there alone? The mine shaft was a forgotten relic from the town's mining past, overgrown with weeds, dark and desolate. Harlow's curiosity was piqued. Something about the location didn't sit right with her. The detectives were soon led to a crucial lead. A set of security camera footage from a nearby gas station that showed Emily's car driving toward the mine shaft. The timestamp aligned with the time Mark had mentioned, but there was no sign of Emily returning. As the hours passed and no more clues emerged, the pressure to find her grew heavier. Mark's nerves were fraying and his outward calm seemed increasingly suspicious. Why had he not seemed more distraught when he reported her missing? Was he hiding something? The breakthrough came a day later, when the detectives managed to track down Robert, Emily's lover. Though he initially denied knowing where Emily had gone, grew nervous under questioning. He was an outsider in the town, and his presence seemed to have stirred suspicion from the start. Robert explained that he had seen Emily earlier, but insisted that they had simply talked and parted ways. The detectives weren't convinced. His alibi was weak, and his discomfort under questioning was unmistakable. The next step was to search the mineshaft area more thoroughly. Detective Miller, after reviewing the evidence, felt a sinking feeling that this was where they would find the answers. The place was isolated, making it an ideal spot for anyone trying to hide something. The detectives took a team to the site, and as they carefully combed through the thick underbrush, a chilling discovery was made. Among the rocks and rubble near the entrance of the mine shaft, they found a piece of fabric, a distinct torn part of a dress that matched what Emily had been wearing when she disappeared. The find was significant, but it was still not enough to connect Robert directly to the crime. The investigation now turned into a search for motive and concrete evidence. It didn't take long for the detectives to uncover disturbing details about Robert's past. He had a history of unstable behavior and obsessive relationships. His growing attachment to Emily had crossed boundaries, and his jealous rants about her commitment to Mark had become more frequent. This, combined with the evidence at the mine shaft, painted a picture that was impossible to ignore. The case took on a more sinister tone as the detectives dug deeper. Emily's affair with Robert, initially thought to be just an illicit relationship, now appeared to be the catalyst for something far darker. The once lovely affair had spiraled into an obsession, and Robert's desperation to possess Emily had led to violence. The detectives were sure now Robert had been the last person to see her, and the mine shaft wasn't just a meeting place. It had become the place of her final moments. As the days went on, the detectives focused on bringing Robert in for further questioning, knowing they were closing in on the truth. They had no idea, though, how twisted and dangerous the final pieces of the puzzle would be. What they had uncovered so far was enough to suggest that Robert had played a crucial role in Emily's disappearance. But they needed more, a confession, a body, or more undeniable evidence before they could make an arrest. It was only a matter of time before the shocking truth came to light. As the investigation continued, the tension in West Ridge grew. Mark, still struggling to comprehend the reality of his wife's disappearance, found himself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. He had always trusted Emily, never imagining that she could be involved in such a situation. Yet the evidence against Robert mounted with every passing day, and it became increasingly difficult for Mark to ignore the painful truth. Emily's affair had led to her tragic end. Detective Miller and Detective Harlow pressed on, following every lead. But it wasn't until a tip came in that the case finally took a turn toward resolution. A local hiker, who often explored the woods around the old mine shaft, had come forward. He had seen something strange in the days following Emily's disappearance. An unfamiliar car parked near the mine shaft, its driver acting suspiciously. When questioned, the hiker had a vague recollection of seeing a man matching Robert's description. His memory was hazy, but it was enough to warrant a more thorough search of the area. The detectives, now with a clearer understanding of Robert's potential involvement, organized another search party, this time focused on a deeper section of the mine shaft. The entrance to this part of the mine had been obscured by overgrown trees and brush, making it easy to overlook. As they ventured into the darkness, their flashlights cutting through the shadows, the air grew thick with the sense of impending discovery. It was here, deep in the forgotten depths of the mine shaft, that they found Emily. Her body, cold and lifeless, was hidden in a narrow crevice, partly covered by dirt and rubble. The sight was haunting, a tragic end to the woman who had once been full of life and promise. She was still wearing the same dress she had been seen in that day, and the injuries to her body were consistent with blunt force trauma. There was no question now, Emily had been murdered, and Robert was the only person who could have done this. The discovery was a devastating blow to Mark, but it also marked the beginning of the end for Robert. He was arrested later that evening, the evidence stacked against him. Undeniable. Robert's demeanor had shifted drastically when the detectives confronted him. The calm, controlled man they had first met was now a shadow of himself, his lies crumbling under the weight of the mounting evidence. Under intense interrogation, Robert's facade finally shattered. He confessed to killing Emily, revealing the dark and twisted nature of their relationship. He admitted that his obsession with her had consumed him, and when she told him that she could not leave Mark, it had pushed him over the edge. The affair, once a thrilling escape for Emily, had become a nightmare for both of them. Robert had convinced himself that if he couldn't have her, no one else could. His jealousy, anger, and sense of betrayal drove him to commit the unthinkable. Robert's confession revealed more disturbing details. He had planned Emily's murder for weeks, biding his time, waiting for the perfect moment. The mineshaft had been a place of their secret meetings, but it had also been where he had decided to take her life. He had lured her there under the guise of wanting to talk, and once she arrived, he had turned violent. In his mind, he believed that by taking her away from Mark, he was freeing her to be with him forever. It was a chilling and delusional justification for the horrific act he had committed. As Robert was taken into custody, the town was left to process the shock and grief of Emily's tragic fate. Mark, heartbroken and betrayed, was left to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. The loss of his wife and unborn child was unbearable, and the knowledge that she had been taken from him by someone so close to her was a pain that no one could understand. In the aftermath, the town of Westridge struggled to find its footing. The shadows of the crime loomed over the once peaceful community, and the pain of Emily's loss was felt by all who knew her. The case had been one of obsession, lies, and violence, a tragic reminder of how quickly a life can be destroyed when a person loses themselves in their darkest desires. Emily Wheeler, a woman with so much potential, had become another victim of a love gone wrong, and the town would never forget the haunting story of the pregnant wife whose secret affair ended in murder.